Are we on? Cool, okay.
Okay, guess we'll start. Everybody's here, right? Everyone's here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Spring Garden Township. We have a workshop tonight before a business meeting. So I want to ask the fellow commissioners to make sure your mics are on in case we want to speak and it picks up. We're on YouTube, so. Our workshop is a presentation from Mr. Chris Toms with CS Davidson. And he is going to share information about Oak Ridge Edge Hill Public Sewer. And it's a 3M plan as part of the township's response to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's order regarding public sewer in the Oak Ridge Edge Hill area. So I guess I'll turn it over to Chris, and then we can go from there with questions, et cetera.
So we have plenty of time, so if you have any questions throughout, please stop me.
Chris, you ought to have a mic.
Oh, are they going to be able to pick him up okay, Luther? Or,
Craig's offering his mic.
oh, got extra.
Yeah, Craig, can you give Chris your mic, please? Is it green? Turn it green.
It's
There we
green
go.
now.
All right. Luther might bring another one, but
Yeah, you got a stereo. If you do two, you get stereo.
There we go.
All right.
Musical mics.
Okay, we're going to start tonight with the Oak Ridge 3M plan. Just to bring everyone up to speed, a 3M plan is an abbreviated version of an Act 537 sewage facilities plan. So how did we get here? Last October, DEP issued an order, and it required the township to amend their existing Act 537 plan using this component 3M abbreviated plan and submit it to DEP within 180 days. It also recommended that the township update their entire township-wide Act 537 plan to address all sewer needs throughout the township and complete that after the 3M plan is approved. And just for reference, your existing Act 537 is from the early 1970s, and it did state that the township would sewer this particular area. This area consists of 134 residential lots. They all have public water, so we don't have a public health issue, with bad wells. But we do have a number of existing on-lot systems that would not meet current standards. You can see there's baker's dozen of cesspools and holding tanks. Plus, many of the lots are either too small, the soils aren't appropriate, or the slopes are too steep for a new on-lot system to be permitted. So, just to give you an idea of that, this is the needs area. This is the Oak Hill area. And if you see those lots that have a yellow color to them, those are the ones that currently either have cesspools or holding tanks. The area that's shaded in a darker red, that's where the soils and slopes wouldn't be acceptable for, or aren't optimal for on-lot systems.
I don't see red.
The
I
big
see-
red, you mean
I
the
see
large-
yellow.
basically the whole downstream from the upper lighter part, right?
That red, is that the red you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. That whole red area on the left side of the screen?
It just sort of looks dark.
It's not the lots, it's everything on this side, on the downhill side of
Okay.
the project area.
Well, a lot of those yellow ones are
Are in that area.
there is public sewer available.
No, there's no public sewer in that area.
Really?
Yes. Let's go back to my first slide.
Back to that map. Why are they so intermittent?
Why are they so intermittent? Well, maybe they had a system that failed and it had to be replaced with a holding tank. Maybe they were
Okay,
originally
okay.
constructed with a cesspool. But if you look at this map, the green dots are the existing manholes. And you can see, bounded by these homes just immediately beside where we're at now at the Township Building, Tri-Hill Road, Business 83, and York Township this area is one of the few areas within the township that does not have public sewer. It is not available to any of those residents. And later I can, provide you with, or show you a map of all the sewer in the township, and you can see.
So down on Verdana Drive, they just all have, what? Some sort of system?
On-lot systems. I don't know, are there many sand mounds? Or are they pretty, just regular on-lot systems with sewage flows into a tank. It gets pumped out. Are you on 3 or 4 year cycles? Every 3 years, per your ordinance, they're required to be pumped out. And then the liquid just flows out of that tank into a drain field. I thought you lost me there for a second. So we looked at a number of options as to how sewer could be installed in this area. Now, this was not a surveyed, complete the design. This is just a schematic, initial sketches. But we looked at 3 different options to actually put sewer in that specific area that we were just looking at, with the most expensive being deeper sewers that would be in the road rights of way, similar to most of your other sewer. To try to save costs, we looked at some shower sewers, but to do that, you'd have to obtain private rights of way through the yards of some of these properties. And then the cheapest option was to shallow them up even more and then put some of the properties, I believe it was 18, would require grinder pumps. Once we sewer this area there, then we have to get it out into the main interceptors, to be collected and eventually make it to PA American's York City plant. One option was to construct a new interceptor where the flow would go down towards kind of the Tyler Run, George Street area, and then run roughly along George Street under Business 83 to tie in near the York Hospital. The second option was a pump station that again would be down towards the bottom of the hill, but we could also pick up some of the other existing customers that are in that area. And then the cheaper option, a smaller station that would just pick up this area. And in each case, it's pumping it back up over the hill to tie into your existing system. Those 9 options had costs that range from $6.9 to $8.9 million. Roughly speaking, you can split the cost in half between the collection system within the area and then that conveyance system to get it to your existing system. In the past, Spring Garden Township, when it's done a sewer project, has taken the total cost of the project and divided that by the the linear footage of the front of the lot lines for each parcel that was tied in. It's called a front foot assessment. In this case, those costs would range, roughly from $44,000 to $70,000 per residence. On another extreme, to finance the project, if you would go with a 20-year Penvest low-interest loan and create a special rate district for these 134 homes, the debt service alone on a quarterly basis would range from $650 to over $1,000. That would be on top of the existing sewer rate. So then in this plan, we have to prepare our recommendation that will come before you for approval in April. This is just an opportunity to introduce you to it. But our recommendation is this. Basically, due to the high costs of the project, we're recommending to DEP that we take some additional time to study this issue. The one option that was not included is to tie into York Township's Tyler Run interceptor. So if you don't know, running along Tyler Run, in and around the creek and on George Street, is a line that York Township actually owns that runs through your township. That line, as I said here, is an 18-inch line installed in the 60s. It does not have any more capacity.
I
So,
disagree with that.
well, it's York Township's line, and they say that it has no more capacity.
Yeah, but I'll disagree with it, because when that line was installed, we were doing 7 to 5 gallons per flush of the toilet. Now we're doing 1.2.
But you have more people that could have been added to it.
Regardless of what comes from every toilet, regardless of what comes from every home, there's a meter at the end of that line. So we know what the flows are instantaneously at all times. And
But I'm telling you, your flow charts are wrong. Those flow charts were written in the 1940s.
I don't use any flow charts, so I don't have anything that would be wrong.
They measure the actual flow in the pipe itself.
I'm sorry, yeah, but I disagree with it, but go ahead.
I'd encourage you to go out there on a day when it's raining and we'll pop the manholes and you'll see that there's not much
Well, there's
capacity.
groundwater infiltration.
And we have to consider that.
Yes, that's I and I.
But that's their clay pipe with groundwater infiltration.
And a lot of that infiltration is actually coming from your lines also.
Well, I knew that. We're not gonna tell PA American Water that, but yeah, I knew that.
Okay.
So we've met with York Township, but what we are conveying to DEP is that given that the short time period to do the study, there's not time to renegotiate these agreements from the 1970s. Yeah, there's not time to study, a complete upgrade to that line. York Township actually even suggested possibly a joint Act 537 plan, where the two townships can work together. We can review both of these agreements that, again, are 5 decades old, and some of them even include dollar figures in them that have not been adjusted for inflation at all. And then proceed to find a solution where both York Township and Spring Garden can have the capacity that they need. Now, that's going to likely lower the cost somewhat of the conveyance system to get from the Oak Ridge area to PA American. It's not going to change the cost of the project itself. So we're still looking at a multi-million-dollar project to sewer this area.
Okay, Commissioner Rooney brought up a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt. But how many homes that could tie in the sewer in York Township could be tied on to that?
In York Township?
If we were to increase the capacity,
York or Spring Garden?
both.
Well, it would just depend on how much you would increase the capacity. Basically, what we would look at is a build-out study of York Township and make sure that there was enough capacity for whatever they would need in the future.
And that's something that we included in the 537.
In the full township-wide plan. But again, that line is York Township's line. So, if it's gonna be upgraded, it's gonna be upgraded, with them. And unfortunately, the right-of-way they have has a number of obstacles that go through it, be it challenges with the creek, some of the properties, the improvements on some of the properties right up against it, be it pools, patios, et cetera. So one of the options we may look at is, a parallel line, not quite right in that track, but to find a more desirable tract and see if we could line that pipe also to improve the pipe and get less I&I in there.
Don't we, the township, also have an undeveloped piece of property in that area?
Nothing that's buildable at this point,
Well, yeah, Dan Dolmeyer's property,
but that's across the street, and that would probably stay in the lot system.
but it would be tributary to this. Your point's well taken. I don't think there's a whole lot of,
I'm just saying, if you're taking into account future possible expansion.
If we do a complete township-wide Act 537, then that whole area that's up there above George Street that does not have access to sewer would be included in that Act 537 as well.
Yeah, we would address all needs at that, within that study. Again, this is an abbreviated study with limited time, you know, and a limited scope. And, you know, again, we came up with a number of options to provide sewer to this area, but relative to, let's say, some norms for sewer projects, this is pretty expensive.
As far as
Per
us being
user.
ordered to come up with a plan, is a plan to do another study a sufficient plan?
I mean, we're making that case, you
Okay.
know, I'm comfortable with that, and I think it's justified by the fact that they made the recommendation that the township do the full study throughout.
Yeah, and as a reminder, DEP didn't say that what they wanted from this study was how you're gonna do it. They wanted you to do the study and look at how you could do it, let them know how you could do it, and then do a full 537. If the results of this study or this SOAR module is, the results of this SOAR module is, hey, this is going to be really expensive for those residents that live there and/or the township.
Yeah.
And the only way to make this more feasible would be maybe to include another township or other residents.
If we were to do
That
a
seems to be
joint
the plan.
project enlarging the capacity of the interceptor on Tyler Run, we would then not need pumping stations, or would we still?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially what we're trying to say to DEP is, like, we evaluated all the options we could in the time we had. There's another option to consider, but we need more time to work with an adjacent municipality to see if that's feasible and how we could bring the cost down for the project.
The opportunity with York Township is, this gives them opportunity for to deal with future growth that they can't deal with. So that could help them and us with the cost, as you can tell, that's gonna be the big kicker, but, okay. Any other questions, or are you still?
Just one more thing here. So the plan is in the hands right now of the Township's Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission. And they have each has a 60-day comment period. What will follow is a public notice that'll go out in early March, and we'll give you that information to send to the paper. To meet the 180-day time limit, we need to have a public hearing on April 1st.
Okay.
What I sent you today, Luther, is a request to DEP for essentially a 10-day extension, so the public hearing can be held prior to your on the same day as your April meeting. So almost like at this time, you could have that public hearing, and then on your agenda for that meeting would be an adoption of the resolution to adopt that plan, thereby amending your full 537 plan. That will go into DEP, and we would expect comments by, mid to late summer from them.
But you're not saying we would have the whole 537 plan?
No,
Our amendment to our previous one would simply be that we are,
it would show what you studied, it would show the area, what was done. There's some additional documents in the study about that, some of the characteristics about that area. And then we've included in the plan this schedule, and because of the negotiation between the two municipalities and the fact that what we would try to do is take a number of agreements that were between both townships between the 70s and 80s and try to combine those all into one, to address the needs of each for sewer conveyance. That's why we put a lot of extra time in the study. I would probably normally say it would be a year, but we bumped it out 2 years. We'll see how DEP feels about it. If that's accepted, and if that goes to plan, once that study would be adopted, then there would be a much more detailed schedule in there that would lay out when the sewer project would occur, when connections would be expected to happen. And, we would also do some additional study on how the project would actually be financed. Yeah, so we'd work with the township so that you could incorporate that into all of your plans.
Yeah, we definitely need grant funding. I mean, 44 to 70, what'd you say, 77,000 or whatever?
Yeah, just 70,000.
That's, yeah, our homeowners aren't gonna take that. They don't.
Chris, the projected future EDUs, would they not be considered when calculating this front foot assessment? Would it only be current EDUs? Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
It would be, to make sure I understand the question, the projected future, would they be if the interceptor is upgraded? Because I don't think there's that much in the project area where there could be
Okay.
a feature.
I mean, like the, like future buildup in York Township.
That would not be
That would
considered.
not be considered.
Right. And that's where we'd have to break out the project and look at, what are the costs to serve? If it winds up being a joint project, then we would have to look at what the costs are that impact Spring Garden Township residents and pull those out, and then that would be included, if you choose to fund it with a front foot assessment. Okay, I bring that up because that's historically how the township has done that, but there are a number of other options that are used to finance a project like this. So,
Dawn, what's our cost to tie into the sewer now?
It's $800 is the tapping fee, and the connection fee, which is only charged if they haven't already been charged that front foot assessment, is $1,100. And that's very rarely charged because most all of those have been taken into consideration.
Do we have, as part of the plan, a proposal for what we would do if, while the planning phase was still in process, one of the existing systems failed such that it needed to be replaced on a property that can't?
Once it's clear that you're conducting the study and that you'll probably do a project, the best alternative for a lot of these is to convert from an on-lot system to a holding tank. Once you have a holding tank, then that's getting pumped out, or yours usually monthly. Yeah. So the owners of those systems have that cost and obligation, to regularly get that pumped out because the liquid can no longer freely discharge into the drain field.
How much
That
would
holding
that
tank's
tend to
probably
run?
about 200 a month.
Holding
If
tank's
they, if
about
they have to
200
get
a
it
month.
pumped monthly, and there's an alarm system with them. It beeps. Most people have duct tape over the alarms. I'm telling you that because I've worked on them.
I believe you.
If they see the red light, the light is red, then they call.
So that 2-year window from August 25 to 27, that's develop the plan and get it approved.
And get finance, have a financing plan.
But that financing plan would be in that 2-year window?
Not
Or
necessarily,
could follow that,
Right.
depending on when it gets done.
right.
So
This
they're
is a-
spending $2,400 a year to get those tanks pumped. I'm guessing, 200 a month, those holding tanks.
And that's just to maintain them. How much does it cost to
That's
get them
just so they
in the
don't
first place?
roll out into the
What they
street.
would do is convert their existing septic tank into the holding tank.
Oh.
So what we would do is go on the back side of that holding tank, cap the pipe, and then that tank, that existing tank would be pumped out as an interim to solution, waiting until they could tie into the sewer.
A lot of them have 2 or 3 tanks. So, yeah, it's a protection. Most of them down there have 2, which was old school. But you want to keep the solids in the first one. Second one should be liquid, and you pump it. A lot of them, you pump it uphill to their drain field. Then when the drain field fills, that's when you do what he said, cap the outlet, and now it's a holding tank. So the ideal thing is when the alarm goes off, you pump the first one, it's done. Second one's all liquid. They pump the second one too, or? Okay. So they're both dry by the time they're done. And then some cases, if there's a third one, if it's a newer system, then they have to pump that one too, I guess. Correct?
Do we know how many holding tanks we have now? Like, do we have a rough number? I'm assuming.
Throughout the township?
Yeah, we have some, I assume.
Well, you have more than these, I know of that, and again, that would be one of the things documented in the study, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and really, if there are any others in sewers available, I'm certain that a result of the study is that they would need to connect to the public sewer. So,
And as it stands now with the way that our ordinance is written, if they have the ability to connect to the sewer and their on-lot system fails, they are required to connect to the sewer system.
I got told I had to regardless. My system wasn't failing.
And that's what would happen in this case also. You know, you can't, if that area is going to be served, you know, everyone in that area would be required to tie in. So that would be part of the plan, is that there would be a mandatory connection ordinance for that.
Do you know if there are any funding sources to help with the consumer portion of the expense?
In that, with a front foot assessment, no. There are some funding sources where the expense to go from the existing septic tank out to the street right away, that what they would call the building sewer. There are some grant programs that could help with that. But you could also look at grant sources. The state occasionally puts out what they call their H2O grant for large sewer and water projects. So if you could get a grant like that and reduce the cost, that would obviously bring down the front foot assessment, you know, or if you would look at other ways to finance the project. One of the things that is we'd want to be careful about is are the costs spread out among all the existing customers? Because in the past, the people tying onto the system in this township have paid their fair share. So to spread the costs out to everyone else is something that at this point we've tried to avoid and try to keep the policy similar to what it has been in the past.
That's something we've never done, to my knowledge. Except when we originally installed the sewer in the 70s. Or late 60s in my area.
Yeah, I noticed the mention of the H2O grant in one of our grant people's proposal.
Yeah, we can research it. But
At this point, that grant's not open, and besides, we're not there yet. You know, we're not, this project's not to that point. But once there's a better idea of what the design would be, you know, and a firmer sense of what the cost would be, that's when you'd want to start pursuing those opportunities.
So what do you want from us today? Or did you want us to
Just
point
listen.
you in a certain?
We're just listening.
No,
Today's
just
just
want
a
you to listen.
presentation.
Questions?
That's good, that's good. We have the options. I think we all need to chew on it.
So there are copies of the plan here at the township. Dawn, do you have just the one copy here of the whole plan? Did we give you one printed one, or did you print it
I
out?
don't think we got a printed copy.
One?
Yes,
Fine.
please.
When we do the public notice, we'll have to,
Yes, please.
but yeah.
Who does York Township use for their engineering?
How many on-lot systems we have?
Do we know?
What do they use? Or
Who? Does York Township use CS Davis?
York Township uses Gannett Fleming. So
Okay,
So we work with their engineer from Gannett Fleming, like every year when we have to submit all the reports for the flows that go to both Springettsbury and the city of York, we interact with their representatives to coordinate on that.
And just as you had asked earlier about how many on-lot systems there are in the township, I just added it up, and it's 845 total throughout the township that are still on-lot systems.
And you're saying this project would force all of them to connect to?
This project would force the 134 that are in this area.
Oh, okay.
What we would have to do through the township-wide study is look at all of those that are still on lots. Look at the lot size that they have, look at the soils, slopes, and is it appropriate for them to stay as on lot? Or does the township adopt a mandatory connection ordinance throughout? And all those that have the capacity to tie in would be required to tie in. That would be part of the study. Then we would also look at those that don't have access to sewer, and same thing. In some cases, I know the lot sizes are large enough that we probably would not have to require that they tie in. But we'd still look at, what the cost would be to extend sewer to those areas.
Because they have a large enough lot to meet the current drainage field.
Sure, so what happens in that case, if their system fails, they have enough room to build another one.
Okay.
So for you said there was a March advertisement for a hearing, but do we need to take action to direct that, or you guys are just gonna do it?
If you want, my interpretation of that is once you directed that this study was going to occur, that notice is part of this study. That's
Okay,
part
I
of this
just want to make sure
process.
we didn't have to.
So no, I don't think you need to take any action tonight. I don't think you'll have to take any action in March. Only if you need to set up a special hearing for this. If DEP accepts our extension request, and considering we're on target, it's just a matter of meeting your meeting date. I would anticipate that they will. You don't need to do anything else until March. You don't have to do anything until April, and we'll make the plan available to you if you wish to review it. So.
Okay, thank you for
Okay.
thank you for your input. We got a lot to chew on.
I guess, is there any other board questions, or do we want to open up to the public to see if they have questions? Since they're,
Yeah, we should do
workshop?
that.
if we can.
Does anybody in the public have any comments?
More questions?
Okay. All right. The board, so we're okay? We'll wait to get more information? Okay. Thank you, Chris. Or who's doing the Stormwater Authority? Okay, so part two. Do you want to
wanna
take a
share,
break or jump
Chris?
right into
No,
it?
I'm fine.
Okay,
Thank you, though.
go on here.
I appreciate it. All right, so this issue has been discussed a few times over the past few years. But you have a liability underground within the township. And while this picture is not from a spring garden culvert, I know that you have a number of culverts that look like this. So there's a significant number of corrugated metal pipes within the township that are starting to rust out, some that look worse than this one. When a corrugated metal pipe rusts out, obviously the water is no longer flowing through the culvert. It's usually running underneath it. It's pulling the material with it. Worst case, what may happen next is there's settlement in the road. Worst case, the road fails.
Making sinkholes.
And if in other areas, you could have sinkholes. Craig and I have talked, and Dave and I have talked about a number of pipes where we're looking at options to line them, looking at options to replace them. But it's a decent expense. And each year we struggle with how are we going to incorporate that into the budget. Your roads, you can generally fund with liquid fuel funds. Liquid fuel funds never are quite enough to keep a road system in good order, but at least get you started and you can supplement general funds for that. Your sewers, you set up your quarterly rates to make sure that you have enough money to maintain those. But the only funding source you have right now for storm sewers is your general fund. And so again, each year we go through this and, that, it's a challenge, to identify the projects to be done and find the money to be able to take care of these replacements. Roughly speaking, you have about 80,000 feet of storm sewer. So I just came up with this very hypothetical situation that if you would try to replace 2% a year, you'd need about $250,000 just to replace it. When you look at the total project costs, when you look at all the other restoration, et cetera, your staff's time, it would be easy to budget $500,000 every year just for storm sewer replacements. But unfortunately, that would only work if we were in a steady cycle of replacements. Unfortunately, we're behind. And there's a glut of pipes that need to be replaced now. So actual cost to start to bring the system into good condition per year would be even more than that.
Do we have an estimate on the percentage that needs to be replaced now?
No, but I'll address that issue in a bit here. The asterisk for what the township owns, that's something that we would have to address if a stormwater authority were formed. There are some private pipes in the system. Some of them, it's clear that they're private, they're under private roads, the township has no responsibility. You have some other situations where some years ago, private landowners installed pipes and tied into this township's storm sewer system. We'd have to identify now, who's responsible. When we look at your MS4 permit, and other policies, we base that number on the idea that once water from a public road goes into a storm sewer system, from that point until its outfall, is something that you have maintenance over. Now, if there is an agreement, if there is a plan, a deed that shows that a portion of that is owned by someone else, then we can address that. But we also have to, or you have to, through your MS4 permit, have a concern about how that water gets from that public road to the outfall. So we're not there yet, but that's a topic that would have to be addressed. If you would form a stormwater authority, one of the first things you'd have to consider is what will the authority be responsible for? Simply put, the most important, I think, is ownership of the storm sewer system, which would include maintenance and replacement of those lines. You could also look at MS4 compliance. Right now, we're reviewing the new MS4 permit that DEP is sending out. It's going to increase, some of the requirements that you have, and some of what we would propose the stormwater authority would do would dovetail in pretty well with those requirements. Let's skip to the bottom one. Another thing that I think you would incorporate into the authority is some of the public works salaries and benefits. Right now, even though they're doing stormwater work, that might be coming out of your general fund. You may be able to set fees up that would help cover some of those costs for what they do to for the system. Once you would set up a fee for stormwater authority and collect it, it's important to note that all parcels have to pay that. So the tax exempt concept is not an issue here in this. And even township parcels would have to pay their fee to the stormwater authority.
I thought this has been challenged in the courts. Has that been resolved?
It has not yet been resolved. But it's one of the things to think about as we try to figure out a funding source.
And I think you're thinking of the Westchester case, which I believe is on appeal again.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I believe it's on appeal again, and it was a bit of a unique situation, because not only was it a nonprofit, they also had an entire stormwater management system on the campus. So their argument was, well, why would we have to pay the assessment if we're not even using their stormwater? So that one's a little unique circumstances, but I think that's the one you're thinking about.
But their flow out is still into the rest of the system, isn't it? Or
It is, but again, that comes back to what would you create an authority for?
right.
If you include the permit, well, the way they're modifying, the DEP is modifying the permit, it's less about sediment and nutrients and more about volume reduction. So if you're going to address volume reduction with the authority, well, now all the BMPs that are in the township, all flow coming from the township would probably be under their purview. If you're going to limit their scope just to the infrastructure, the maintenance, and condition of those pipes, then
What does BMP stand for?
BMP is a best management practice. So let's say like a rain garden, stormwater basin,
Right.
infiltration pit.
I'll disagree with that. I think we need to send it back to Redmond and Williams and Indian Rock Dam. I mean, we can drink it again. You know what I mean? As long as it's not contaminated bad, York Water can treat it.
Where do we currently line off that water to?
It goes in Mill Creek. What's the creek down here?
You have dozens of discharge
We
points.
have dozens of discharge.
Yeah, I'll show that as we get to
It
the,
all goes to Redmond or Williams or Indian
So-
Rock Dam.
Drains to the
We're
lowest point in
downstream.
the drainage
Or
area.
downstream.
We're downstream of them, Dave.
We'd have to pump it up to those.
Yeah, most of our property is downhill from there.
So now they want to keep it on lot. So where are we going to get our water from? Up north?
Well, some of it will always go into the water table.
But, yeah, 100%'s not gonna go in. They just wanna infiltrate, I don't know what percent.
and to be clear, that's not the purpose of our conversation tonight.
Right,
Okay.
That's,
yeah.
if you want to make a comment on that, that should go to DEP with the new permit.
And keep
Okay,
in
but
mind,
that's
rain
not-
barrels and rain gardens and things like that, they don't stop the water permanently, they just slow it down.
Sure. And any water that goes in the ground will eventually make it to a stream or a well and eventually come back out. So what we're talking about now is the pipes that you have in the ground need some attention, and we need to find a way to fund their replacement. Should you choose to form a storm water authority, here are some of the steps, not necessarily in this order. There's obviously a legal component of actually forming the authority. It's a separate government entity. We have to do an inventory of all of your pipes. Now, a lot of that is already done because of the mapping that has to be done for your MS4 permit. But we need to verify that we have all the sizes correct, and everything is there. We're pretty good there. The next part is pretty important, and this goes back to your question about, what percentage of pipes need to be replaced. We have to do an assessment of those pipes. Fortunately, this is where your staff has the experience and the equipment to help out significantly. So they can go out and with the video camera, run the camera through the pipe, and give an assessment, measure the pipe. We can make some also assessments. Are these pipes large enough to meet their needs? And then give them a condition rating and then come back and come up with a plan as to how much needs to be replaced. The other issue, maybe not a first priority, but we also need to look at where are their drainage problems, and maybe there should be storm sewer there, and there's presently not. Once all that's completed, we look at, what's the total cost, to bring everything up to a good condition. And then we look at goals, particularly how much do you want to try to replace every year? That's when we start to develop a budget. We look at, what are those project costs? What are your MS4 compliance costs? What's your staff budget? We'd want to build into that. And then we can start to get a sense of, what's your stormwater budget per year? Once we have that number, now we have to set a rate to generate that money.
When you're talking about assessing the pipe, would you try to run the entire line? Or just look at both ends and figure the middle is not any better?
Well, we have what's called a pole cam, which we can sit down in. It shoots, instead of the camera rolling through the pipe like it does in a sewer main,
Right.
this will shoot a projection through that pipe, give us an idea of what shape that pipe is
The whole
in
pipe is in.
and the diameter of that pipe.
I think, and that's a judgment call with each one. If you can look at each end and see that it's failed, there's no sense in going any further. You know, if it's a particularly long one, you know, you may want to run the camera in.
That pipe's a little tricky because it,
Yeah,
and you don't want to get your camera stuck.
yeah, because if it hits a spot that's rusted out in the middle and it fell in,
Yeah.
you're digging the road up.
Digging the road up to get
Yeah.
it out.
So, yeah, but again, your staff has enough experience with that.
Just
that-
need to send in a little helicopter drone to save it. Find that camera.
No, they do pretty good with that camera. They'll stop at every joint and they can turn that camera up, down, all around, see where water's coming in, look at the condition. And if it's too rusted out at the bottom, I'm sure they'll back it out, cause it ain't cheap.
So again, once you have a budget, you know, like I said, then you need to set a rate. You need to generate the fees that'll support that budget. The first step is to determine what your equivalent residential unit is. You hear us talk about EDUs, equivalent dwelling units for sewer. For stormwater, it's usually ERUs, and what that is, it's what's the average impervious area per parcel. We've done some rough work with some old aerial data sets, and you're at roughly 3,000 square feet per parcel, which is pretty similar to what we've seen elsewhere. The most accurate way to determine this is actually to fly the whole township, you know, and get that surveyed data from an aerial flight and digitize each parcel to see what the impervious area is. And then there's a series of less expensive options that you can consider, and we could present those to you. One thing we're finding is that you're probably gonna have to do something like that to be compliant with the new MS4 permit. You're gonna have to have an awareness of the impervious area per parcel. We're not gonna make a final recommendation on yet until that permit finally goes through. Once you have an ERU, you have that ERU value, then you have to figure out what's your billing structure. Is it per ERU? So for instance, if an ERU is 3,000 square feet of impervious area and an industrial complex has 300,000 square feet, you know, do you just divide by 3,000 and figure out that's how many ERUs they have? I can tell you, you have some commercial, industrial, and institutional parcels in the township that have a very high number of, high amount of impervious area. Another system that we've had success with is a tiered structure. So maybe for each residence that is 3,000 square feet or less, they pay one. 3,000 to maybe 6,000 or a higher number, it pays two. And then maybe you have a larger jump to have a third class and then a much larger class that would bring in all of the larger parcels, and particularly the parcels with larger amounts of impervious area. I'll skip down. One of the reasons why you would consider a tiered structure is the appeals. If you say someone has 32,000 square feet of impervious area and they say, no, I have 33 and it'll impact your rate, then you have to go through an appeals process to figure out, okay, how much they have. And this is either, if you have the aerial data, digitizing it, if you're not, maybe even going out to the parcel and measuring it. So that's just another item to consider if you go down this route. Credits, we talked about BMPs earlier. So if a parcel has a rain garden and that's well maintained and it passes all of its inspections that need to be done as far as the MS4 permit, do you give them a discount on their rate because of the contribution that they have to volume reduction? Again, if your focus is in volume reduction, that makes sense. If your focus is just on repairing the infrastructure, you know, you have to decide, is there a connection there that you think is worthwhile for a discount? And finally, you need to set up a process that as the staff is managing permits for, say, new patios, decks, pools, et cetera, how is that impervious area tracked over time as the parcel changes, or improvements on the parcel change.
Do we have any areas in the township that are currently seeing backflow during high rains or anything like that?
One in particular, but that I think has been resolved with some recent upgrades to Virginia Avenue.
Okay.
Well, it's still being upgraded.
So that's all I have. That is just a brief introduction to, some of the steps of forming a stormwater authority and some of the things that you need to consider. This is a map of your storm sewer system. All the squares are inlets throughout. All of the stars are outfalls. So when you ask me, where does it flow? Like I said, it discharges to it in a number of different spots along different water bodies.
Will you send us this?
Sure. Do they have access to data?
They should, yeah.
Yeah, if you have access to CS Datum, you can pull this up and look at it.
If anybody needs help looking at it, I
If
can
you
help
don't,
you.
Ann, we'll get you on it.
We need a login and password, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't done it for a few years, so I'm not sure
I don't
if
think
I.
Yeah, honestly, this is just lo-fi. I just clipped it out. That's your system right there.
Dave
you-
will get you on it.
Do you know if there are systems, or do you have systems that will just automatically analyze the aerial data, or does that have to be done by hand?
Yeah, it would be done automatic. Once you get that survey, you have to overlay the parcels and then identify it. You can utilize programs to identify it. It does not have to be hand digitized. Occasionally what we'll do is then take a sample of that to test them, to verify the numbers are coming out well. But, again, when you look at a building structure, this is another reason why I lean towards the tiered structure, because even if you're plus or minus a few percent in the accuracy, you're not bumping up one building structure or the other. So I'm aware of another municipality that bills by the fraction of EDU or ERU. So that number has to be spot on, or else it could be appealed.
Do you guys have, do you use a GIS system what do you use, ArcMap? I mean, okay, that's now, I guess the question here is, if we wanted to proceed the next steps, is there a way to get a whole outline or timeline, and also some kind of cost estimates for each step? Because I guess once we get in so deep, it's hard to turn back, right?
Well, we have to do this. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
No, you don't have to.
But we
do
don't
it.
have to. We can still pull general fund.
We
but-
should.
But, right, we think the costs in the future are going to get so great that it's going to.
It's stupid not to.
So we actually prepared something similar a number of years ago, and it's just a matter of updating it. I think one of the important things to hone out in that is, how are you going to collect the impervious area data? If we're going to fly it, we're running out of time. It has to be done in the winter.
We got to create the stormwater authority because it's been coming up. I can show you emails that go back at least 2 years, maybe more.
So wait, our window is through March,
Yeah, once
early
things
April?
leaf out.
Roughly. Leaf,
But-
when leaves start kicking in.
But I think there are a number of steps, and some that are going to take a decent amount of time. One thing that can be done now, which is in my opinion, is a good idea, whether you form a stormwater authority or not, is to do that condition assessment. To have a clear understanding of, how much of the system is in good, fair, poor condition. What do we have in front of us? And that can help you make the decision as to how you want to proceed and how quickly you want to proceed. And if that takes time and you decide you want to do the aerial flight, well, maybe that's done next winter. If you want to jump on it right now, we can see if we can get proposals now. My concern with that is I have to bring that to you at your March meeting, then get it scheduled. I'm just concerned we're running out of time there. But like I said, there are plenty of other things that can still be done.
Let's start
In the
with
time
the
frame.
assessment, and then after the assessment, I believe we ought to create a stormwater authority.
Well, assessment, I think, yeah, but what can we do to expedite it instead of waiting till the March meeting to give you, unless we call a special meeting, right? Is that the only other
Well,
way?
you're gonna have, there's a lot of timing requirements to set up a municipal authority.
No, for the assessment.
So the assessment,
Would be to give us an idea of what the impervious surface is, correct, and fly the aerials.
so the first
Stuff
part of
like
the
that.
assessment that I'm speaking of is actually to look at all the pipes.
Oh, that part. Then the aerial part, you're
The
saying.
aerial part,
It's towards the end.
we have, I believe it's a 2018 data set, that we can start to get a rough idea of what the impervious area is per parcel, and work from that. It's not as accurate, but it can at least start to get us in the ballpark. And we could utilize that and then get you an idea of what the prices would be if you'd want the more detail, to go about it in a more detailed way, and modify that in the future. That could be done now. We could work with staff, township staff, and start the condition assessment now. Those are the two things.
Yeah.
Looking at existing data, looking at existing aerial data, and starting the pipe condition assessment.
If we were to establish a stormwater authority, what would be the process of establishing whether or not a property, a residential or commercial property had these BMPs? They need to.
So that, BMPs back to, it's either 2004 or 2006 are tracked through your MS4 permit. And then they're all inspected regularly. So that's what I would utilize. You have that data set now.
And we do track all new impervious surfaces now, too.
Yeah, we're both looking at the BMPs that are already mapped. So you have all the O&M agreements, all that sort of stuff already in hand.
If people have done it in a formal fashion.
And if they haven't done it in a formal fashion, it's not getting inspected, and they wouldn't recommend that they get any kind of credit at that point.
Yeah, a lot of the information is already there. Or should have been. We have our work cut out to make sure we're doing the right thing.
All right, so if we want to do this, have them proceed with this assessment, we need to make a motion, take action, and then it's going to be funds involved for you to do this work.
Let's get.
So do we do that now?
Advertise it for next month.
Yeah, exactly, because this is a workshop.
Oh, it's a workshop.
Yeah, we can't vote,
And it's
okay?
not
It's not on the agenda to do, so
We'll
we
write
have to bring it
something
back to
up,
March.
advertise it for next month,
Right,
have
okay.
public comment on it and vote on it. And that's all we can do now.
Yeah,
Okay.
think we have in the 2025 budget.
Not enough.
Yeah,
Oh.
but the costs of, if Public Works employees are going out and scanning the pipes, that's in the budget. That's not, you wouldn't need to authorize that.
That part,
That's-
but
that's
the-
administrative.
Right.
Engineering cost.
Whatever extent they can.
We have $100,000 budgeted for engineering services under stormwater management.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we do
Well,
have,
let's,
right, okay.
so
Right.
so we can start the assessment without taking a vote? Is that what you're telling me, Luther?
Well, we did, yeah, we budgeted for that purpose.
Budgeted for it, so do we need to direct staff? or
Nope,
does it
we
just-
don't need to do
Nope,
anything.
staff will handle it.
Staff can just do what they
Yeah,
want.
Okay.
You're not directing anything because it's not on the agenda. We're not taking
All right.
any action.
So,
No, I didn't mean, were we going to take action now? I meant in general about this. Do we need to add it to the agenda of a meeting so that we do direct them, or can they?
Not
move
for, not for the assessment part.
Okay.
Obviously, if you wanted to move forward with actually forming the authority, then you'd have to direct
Okay.
us to put stuff together, and then,
Thank you.
once you start spending money
Okay.
on the back end, like, if you wanted to get a plane to fly over, you'd have to authorize that, because that's not in the budget.
right,
All right, so what we can do is update, what we had proposed that helped Luther get to that budget number, and present that to you at an upcoming meeting, and then look from there as, what parts of that or all of it do you want to authorize, to begin. So
Sounds like a plan.
tonight, again, was just informational. You know, there wasn't any intent that you would take any action, but really just to prepare you for what is to come should you choose to create this funding source.
When you're talking about a stormwater authority being an additional entity, how many people are required for that entity as a minimum?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's in the statute. The Municipal Authorities Act runs down exactly what you have to do, how many people you have to have, all that.
The board, you as a board would nominate those members of the authority, regardless of how many seats, and you determine the number of seats. That whole process is spelled out as to how that would be formed.
Okay. And those would be volunteers, or they could be,
Yeah,
It's a volunteer board.
it's
yeah.
a volunteer board, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Some that we're familiar with are similar to or almost the same as a board, and they meet immediately before. Some act as a completely different entity and meet at a different time entirely. Their meetings are pretty technical and usually pretty brief.
Well, we'll have to look and see what other municipalities and townships are doing.
Yep.
And
Okay.
we'll go from there.
Are there any other board comments? And then I'll ask if there's any public comments on this,
Questions?
questions,
Is there any public comment?
comment on this? Okay, seeing none. All right, thank you, Chris. Will
you.
be continued. There's no other business, Luther? We have it on there, but we have no. The other thing is public comment, just any general public comments are not on the agenda. Is there any other comments? Okay, that will conclude our workshop. Thank you for coming. 6:30 is our business meeting. If you want to stick around, feel free to stick around here.
Saw some things in the conference room, does somebody have to sign some stuff?
Oh, there's some plan, I think we have to sign plans, good, so we'll do that in between. All right, thank you all, we'll see you soon. Should have coordinated so we bring pizza. Well, I brought pretzels
Oh, that's you.
for dinner, but,
Oh, Mike?
oh.
You sign that one for me, that's the developer agreement that needs your signature.
Ooh, this is Crest.
This is Crestway, lot 78.
So it's okay?
Everything's good to go, I'm gonna get this off my desk. Leave it all.
Development agreement. This is development agreement.
Oh, okay. And then the plans are in there that need your signature, so.
Let's see, name, title.